This is Arab Talk on KPOO 89.5 FM in San Francisco. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. I'm Jess on Nam.
And I'm Jamal Dejani.
Jamal, this is a momentous day. The United Nations General Assembly is having its annual meeting in New York City. It's full of controversy. The major controversy right now, which will form the basis of our show today to some extent, is the acknowledgement and the commitment to a Palestinian state that's going to be voted on and has already been approved by a number of states, including Australia, France, Spain, and the United Kingdom. It's causing consternation among the Israelis, among the Americans, who have threatened all countries who agree to acknowledge and note a Palestinian state. We're going to be talking about all of the implications of the acknowledgement of a Palestinian state, both politically and globally, as part of the show today. Another big news from the United Nations, Jamal, is the UN Independent International Commission on the Inquiry of the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem, did conclude that on reasonable grounds that Israeli security forces and the military are committing genocide against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. This is yet another kind of international body, Jamal, that has come to the conclusion, albeit a little bit late, that Israel is committing genocide. We're going to be talking about that. Senator Bernie Sanders, the first major U.S. politician, has also come out and said that Israel is committing genocide. So we're going to be talking a bit about the implications of yet another international effort to show and demonstrate legally that Israel's activities in Gaza amount to genocide. A number of other things have been happening, Jamal, including at the Emmys. Hannah Enbinder, on her acceptance speech, at her Emmy acceptance speech, one of the things that she said, along with a number of other things, was free Palestine. Hannah Enbinder is a Jewish American. She's getting a tremendous blowback from doing that. And Netanyahu has admitted that he's been working for years to approve or prevent, rather, the establishment of a Palestinian state. He said yesterday, Jamal, that there will never be a Palestinian state. And we're going to see the intersection of the Netanyahu government's insistence that there will never be a Palestinian state with this global kind of movement that we should recognize a Palestinian state. So a lot to talk about today, Jamal. We have an action-packed show today.
Well, just let me start by adding something just briefly, because as we're speaking, there are countries that are on the fence. Well, France is supposed to also recognize a Palestinian state. Macron said he will.
Yeah.
And Portugal has recognized the state of Palestine. But also you have some countries on the fence, like Italy, saying, let's wait and see, etc. That's from the government. However, as we are speaking, Italy is witnessing the largest strike and demonstration across the country, south to north, east to west.
For
the
Palestine.
Whole country, it's pro-Palestine and calling on the government to recognize it. So this is the largest. I don't know how far can we go back to see a large strike like this in Italy. So the tide is shifting. The other thing it's going on is the flotilla, the Sumud, which is, I think, about 17 ships now. The number has grown. So I don't know. I haven't been keeping track with all the ships that have been joining in. That flotilla is on its way to Gaza with humanitarian aid. So that's another thing to kind of keep an eye on. But let's start with the first story, Jess, which is, you're right, the United Nations, and that's OCHA, and they have their commission, concluded that on reasonable grounds that the Israeli authorities and Israeli security forces have committed and are still continuing to commit the following acts of genocide against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And they list them, and I'm not going to go through them all, but they have a whole list, starting with killing members of the ethnic group, which is the Palestinians, to causing bodily and or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the ethnic group. And then they go on, then there are other things, but those are the major things. Then they talk about the incitement to genocide. The commission concludes that the Israeli President Isaac Herzog and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Defense Minister, former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, have incited, and called for genocide, and that Israeli authorities have failed to take action against them to punish this incitement. The commission has not fully assessed, by the way, because they said they have a lot of work to do, statements made by lower members of the Israeli government and other Israeli political and military leaders, including Minister of National Security Itmar Ben-Gvir, which everybody knows what he says, and Minister of Finance Bezalel Smotrich, and considers that they too should be assessed to determine whether they constitute incitement to commit genocide. So the list is very long and very damning and enumerated all the acts of genocide. I mean, in the the only people I will say we're not committing genocide is really Israel and the United States.
That's it.
And this is UN. We've talked about other organizations from Human Rights Watch and so forth. They all said that Israel is committing genocide. There is the ICC and the ICJ that issued a warrant for the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu and his former Minister of Defense. I don't know how these countries and other supporters, because the last vote, every time now there is a vote at the United Nations, the whole world votes with Palestine. At the Security Council, the only country that objects and casts a veto is the United States. At the General Assembly, it's the United States, Israel, and sadly, some countries that are dependent on the United States,
Micronesia,
Palau, and so forth. And you have a handful, basically, of countries, but then you have the rest of the world saying enough is enough. And just the United States and Israel want to continue this genocide. Imagine at the United Nations Security Council, there's yet another call for a ceasefire. That was the last call, basically, to stop.
But
and the United States, only the representative of the United States raised her hand saying, veto.
We don't want a ceasefire. The United States does not want a ceasefire. Well, Jamal, we've been speaking about this for how many months now? Over a year, talking about the acts of genocide that are being committed against the Palestinians in Gaza, with increasingly brutal acts being committed against Palestinians in Jerusalem and in the West Bank. But specifically in Gaza, there is unanimity among the world community that Israel is committing genocide. We know that. It keeps piling on. The evidence keeps piling on. But in some ways, this is not breaking news that the United States and the Israelis continue to not just lie about what's happening in Gaza, but to continue to push back. In fact, what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing right now is doubling down. He has already issued a number of press releases and statements in New York against what's happening with this particular report, as well as the kind of increasing numbers of countries that are going to recognize a Palestinian state. And he shows no backing down whatsoever. In fact, he and Donald Trump are going to double down. What they have been saying, Jamal, that they are going to go beyond just vetoing these resolutions in the United Nations. They've said specifically, and this is from Netanyahu himself, as well as Smotrich and the others in his cabinet, they will punish countries who acknowledge the existence of Palestine and a Palestinian state. They are going to punish and go after the United Nations any reports that, in fact, continue to show evidence for the genocide that is being committed right now. So they're going on offense right now, Jamal. They're not even going on defense. They're not saying, "Oh, this is not true," blah blah blah. They're going to attack institutions, individuals, countries, other actors who are actively engaged in this process of identifying the genocide. They're going to come after people, Jamal. People are going to be actively pursued for their statements, for what they're saying about the genocide in Gaza. So it seems like their approach, Jamal, is to double down yet again.
Yeah, but it's not going to work. I mean, the train left the station. We're talking about
With multiple stops.
two
With multiple
topics
stops.
here. One, and we'll come to it later, which is the recognition of the Palestinian state, and we'll talk about the importance of it or the lack of importance of it, and so forth, as some might argue. But for me, the most important thing, this whole thing about genocide, is not just litigating the issue. It's really a call for ceasefire to stop the carnage. I mean, that's a whole different thing. Going after Israel, for example, at the ICC and others for committing genocide, that might take years. But what's not going to wait is that every day we witness the killing of children. We witness the bombing of hospitals. We witness the killing of AIDS workers. We witness the killing of doctors, nurses, journalists. And that has to stop. And that's the dangerous part, that the parties that are supporting this, I understand what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing. He's been doing it for years. He has one agenda and one agenda in his mind: the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, something that has been written about. You just go and read the book of Ilan Pappé that started in 1947, didn't start today. And he's the implementer. He's the implementer, continuing the work of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. If you ask him the question, I mean, privately, he will tell you he'd rather see not a single Palestinian alive. I mean, that's his, not by just talking, that's by his actions. Now, the countries that are supporting this, that's going to be the problem in the future. How they going to answer to this in the books of history, that we had the opportunity to stop the killing of children, to stop the carnage, and we didn't do anything about it. In fact, we aided and abetted this, and that's basically what I see, and that's why I'll connect this to the recognition of the state of Palestine, because some countries are trying to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and the light at the end of the tunnel is not a bright light. They're seeing that we made a mistake. We're going to get dragged, and they're trying to make things to right, things that were made wrong.
No, I think that's right, Jamal. But you said something really important. How history will be written about this. I think there's even a bigger anxiety, which has been is articulating among international legal experts right now, given the enormity of the information and the data that is consistently said that Israel is committing war crimes, committing genocide, and going against international law, violating international law. All the countries that have been complicit in Israel committing genocide may also be legally complicit and may have legal consequences as a result of sending arms, sending weapons, giving Israeli cover, and not doing anything to stop it, knowing that, in fact, the genocide is occurring. So I think some countries are starting to see that legal consequence, not that they should also look at the moral, ethical aspects of it too, but they're looking at their own interests too and seeing that there could be profound legal consequences as this continues to unfold.
Yeah, and that's why that's why our next topic, that's why I wanted to add this in, that almost 2 years after Israel's war on Gaza began, and this is a progressive Democratic senator.
2 years, Jamal.
Bernie Sanders. And he said on Wednesday that Israel is guilty of committing genocide against the Palestinians. Sanders, by the way, acknowledgement came after the United Nations released the report that we're talking about the day before on Tuesday, saying that Israel was committing a genocide. And then he, in an opinion article on his website, if you go to Bernie Sanders' website, who identifies as a democratic socialist, wrote that he agreed with the UN and the assessments of other human rights organizations such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, B'Tselem, and Physicians for Human Rights, in Israel. And he said the conclusion is inescapable. Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Israeli leaders have made their intent clear, he added, and then he started quoting statements from Israeli politicians and lawmakers right there on Senator Bernie Sanders' website. This is very important because, as you know, people were running after Bernie Sanders, who's progressive, and I don't want to go way back when before he, was not ready to condemn Israel for its occupation, for what's going on, and we're talking about 2016 and before that. And then later on, he started condemning Benjamin Netanyahu, and he started directing the attention of the world. That's not like the Israelis who are committing genocide or killing Palestinians, or it's really the bad government of Benjamin Netanyahu. And he resisted saying the word genocide, by the way.
Right.
Not until last Wednesday, he finally, I think you keep adding the evidence and the evidence and evidence. The evidence has been mounting, and he finally said, "Yep, that's a genocide." And I think that's very important.
Yeah, I mean, I see that it has a certain kind of import, but the concern that I have, I want to go back to our discussion just a few minutes ago. The problem is that it's not having any material impact on the ground for Palestinians. Food is still being denied Palestinian, especially children who are continuing to starve to death. The Gaza City, Jamal, is being viciously bombed and assaulted by the ground invasion of the Israeli military into the most densely populated part of Gaza right now, in the middle of Gaza City. They've told everybody to evacuate. There are hundreds of thousands of Palestinian civilians that remain in Gaza City who are unable to evacuate, and they are basically being slaughtered as we speak. So these pronouncements, albeit, for the historical record and maybe the legal record, are important, as you say, Bernie Sanders, the, OCHA, the United Nations. But we know this painful reality right now is, despite all of this international condemnation of Israel, they continue full steam ahead with the blessing of the United States, committing these genocidal acts every day, Jamal. And and we talked about this last week, because of the assassination and breach of the sovereign Qatari, land, and the attack by the Israeli cruise missile that killed, 6 or 7 individuals in the middle of Doha. There's nothing happening with the ceasefire. The ceasefire is not going to happen. So we're faced with this really kind of unbelievably catastrophic reality. Despite the world coming together against Israel, Jamal, they continue to slaughter Palestinian civilians and continue to commit genocide every single day. That's this kind of bizarro world that we're living in right now.
It's definitely bizarre, but they cannot escape that. I mean, that's what I'm saying. They are escaping it as we're speaking. They're continuing with the genocide. Yet they cannot escape the consequences. And I'm talking about the future, and I'm talking about the history, and I'm talking about the International Criminal Court. I mean, you can't just go on and on. The tide is shifting. That's why I started by talking about what's happening today in Italy. I mean, millions of people are demonstrating in Italy. That's why we mentioned the 77th annual Emmy Awards, where one of the winners, Hannah Einbinder, saying "Free Palestine" in her acceptance speech, and then when she was interviewed, she doubles down. She said, "It is my obligation," and I'm quoting, "as a Jewish person, to distinguish Jews from the state of Israel. Our religion and our culture is such an important and long-standing institution that is really separate to this sort of ethno-national state." And she condemns the occupation and talks about the killing of children and so forth. They cannot, listen, the most hated country in the world now is Israel. And I'm not inventing this.
Maybe the United States is a close.
Just take
the
their
United
call.
States is a close
The
second.
most unwelcomed tourists in the world are Israelis. They cannot go to the standard countries they've been used to go to Cyprus, to Greece. They're met by the locals there, telling them that they are unwelcome there. In Italy, in other countries, they're hiding their identities. They, once people find out that they have Israeli soldiers, you just look it up on the internet. You see signs in the windows saying that Israeli soldiers are not welcome there. But regardless, you're absolutely right. If you listen to the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, you think he lives in La La Land. He's in denial. They want to talk about that they have the most moral army in the world. They keep repeating that, just repeating a lie time and time again. They think they can convince the world, which they succeeded for many, I would say, decades. And now people are not buying this. And they're not buying it in the United States. We're seeing now outspoken politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a Republican, who is a conservative, and she's seeing through it. She's seeing that that Americans are wasting billions of dollars on Israel, a country that boasts itself that it's an economical power, and yet they open their hands to receive American U.S. aid and drag the United States in wars that the United States shouldn't be dragged on into Iraq and want them to attack Iran and into Gaza. Americans don't want that. They don't want to send both their money and their children to be killed because of Israeli hegemony and Israeli wars, Jess. It's been changing.
Yeah, it is changing. And I have noticed something interesting, even though we have been talking about this one point for many, many, many years now. We have both said that it's not in the U.S. interest to support Israel. It is not in our strategic interest. It's not in our economic interest. It's not in our geopolitical interest. I've been making that argument. You've been making that argument for so many years. And it fell on deaf ears because the standard Democratic and Republican kind of statement is that it's in the U.S. interest to do everything we can to support Israel. Now we're seeing for the first time, Jamal, among politicians, among think tanks, among the inner circle in Washington, who continues, and I might add, even this last week gave another $8 billion to Israel, are now starting to say things, well, maybe it's not in our best interests. Maybe this is hurting the United States. Maybe the alliance and relationship with the state of Israel is causing us harm. This is the first time we're hearing the Beltway people, the people who are kind of run the political machinery in Washington, D.C. for this country are beginning to question that. They see all of the profound negative consequences legally, economically, politically, morally, ethically. And this is kind of a new thing for people in the Beltway world to say that, well, maybe this isn't true. Maybe it's not in our strategic interest to support the Israelis anymore. That's a big development too.
Look what happened just recently, Jess. And this is very important for the United States, because the United States has been working hard on developing strategic interests in the Middle East, not just in interest, because we rely on the oil that is there, and also you have the Suez Canal, you have strategic points, you have the Arabian Gulf, and you have the Red Sea and so forth, that you need partners, you need friends. You cannot just rely on one country that basically keeps milking you for money and weapons and so forth. And the other countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, we make money out of these countries. They spend money
Right.
in the United States. And just with recently this attack on Qatar, which we talked about it last week, has huge repercussions. People haven't been talking about this now. The fact that Qatar is one of the number one allies of the United States in the Middle East, has the largest runway for the B-52s and B-1 bombers and so forth in the Middle East. It's a military and strategic partner. Israel was allowed, and I say that was allowed. I don't want to get into the weeds of this, whether Trump found out about it 10 minutes before or when he found out about the Israeli attack happening when they were in the air and so forth. That's nonsense, because as a partner and having one of the major bases in Qatar, your obligation is to protect that country from any enemy, be it, from Iran, from Israel, from Russia, and so forth. And the United States did nothing that the Israelis were able to attack in the downtown of Doha in a residential district, killing, by the way, Qataris as well as Palestinians there. And so now what happened? Okay. Now, for the first time, Saudi Arabia formed a military and strategic partnership with Pakistan. Pakistan is a nuclear power. It's just not out of the blue, because they can have like military and strategic partnership with Turkey and other Muslim countries, with Egypt, with so forth. No. Why did they select Pakistan?
Well,
it's the only Muslim country that
it's a nuclear power.
Yeah, it's the only Muslim country that can move nuclear weapons into Saudi Arabia. They've already sent jets and planes and so forth. Okay. Egypt bought Chinese missiles.
Right.
And placed them in Sinai. Not American missiles, not British missiles now. They're cozying up to the Chinese. They're getting weapons from China. They've been getting weapons from Russia. And the United States gives Egypt over $2 billion a year. But they're spending now their money in China because they don't trust that the Americans would allow them to use these weapons against Israel.
Why would they trust the Americans, Jamal?
But I'm just saying, because there are strings attached. And why did they go to China? All the way to China, since they have a partnership with the United States. They receive military aid from the United States. They go all the way to China. And of course now what the Israelis do, because they don't want to mess with Egypt, a country with 100 plus million people. They've been neutral now on the war on Gaza. They're now whispering in the ears of Donald Trump and his defense minister. Talk to the Egyptians. They've been bringing missiles into China. They're actually also creating underground bases. I'm not telling you something that is secret, because the United States has confirmed this on satellites and so forth, that the Egyptians are fortifying Sinai, the closest part to Israel, because they don't trust the Israelis. And they don't trust the Americans, because they don't know if America is going to look the other way if Israel decides to attack Egypt. So they have to protect their interests, and they cannot protect their interests because they have a strategic partnership with the United States, because they saw what happened in Qatar.
Well, I think that's exactly right, Jamal. And, the Organization of Islamic Countries had a big meeting this last week to talk about a response to what happened in Doha and Qatar. And they made a lot of, strong statements. But here's the reality for all of the Islamic countries and all the Gulf countries and all the Arab countries. Israel and the United States do whatever they want. They don't care about these strategic partnerships. They don't care about Camp David. They don't care about the Abraham Accords. They care about redefining and reconfiguring the entire region, Jamal. So, my question back to these Gulf countries, which are, the Abraham Accords, Camp David Accords, why would Egypt, why would Jordan, why would the Gulf countries continue with these agreements when they are being not just disrespected, Jamal, because they've been horribly disrespected. It's unbelievable how, they've been, spit on politically by Israel and the United States. But now their entire safety militarily is in jeopardy. Why would any of these countries believe that Israel is not going to attack them?
Well, I think sometimes it takes like crying wolf so many times. They were living in fantasy land that if they were
Fantasyland, man.
if they make a peace agreement with Israel,
He'll be protected.
if they
They
are
believed it.
also make a strategic partnerships with the United States, then they are on good grounds, you know. And then they look and they see what happened to Qatar. You cannot be a more important ally to the United States than
And
Qatar.
Qatar.
You cannot be more than that. And then they see that how they were thrown to the wolves
Under
and
the bus, man.
allowed the Israelis to attack their country. And that's why the Saudis now they're running. You know, Saudi Arabia buys billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of American hardware, aside from everything else. And they say, you know, we can't trust that. We need now people to help us. And if Israel's a nuclear power and every time keeps threatening everyone else with its nuclear power, we got to partner with a nuclear country. Egypt is saying, I'm not going to keep buying American weapons with strings attached, telling me I cannot use them here and I cannot use them there. I want to get something else, and they're getting Chinese weapons. And China, as you know, is now getting far more advanced than the United States in its technology, in everything else. And also forgot to mention Iran. Where do you think Iran is getting its replenishing its weapons and so forth? From China and Russia. They have also strategic partnerships there. And
yeah, I think those are really important points, Jamal. And I think MBS has made an important strategic decision by partnering with Pakistan. I think that's a very, very important decision. I think the Egyptians buying weapons from China is a very, very important strategic decision. But I really hope, although I don't believe it yet, I really hope that this is a wake up call for all of these countries. You can live in this fantasy land of having being a U.S. ally or being ally with the Israeli American, strategic alliance, and think that that doesn't protect you. Breaking news for all of you: you're not going to be protected. I actually believe, Jamal, looking at how this is all playing out, that Israel would not hesitate to violate the sovereignty of Egypt, wouldn't hesitate to violate the sovereignty of Saudi Arabia, wouldn't hesitate to violate the sovereignty of any of these countries. They will do it in a heartbeat, and the United States won't do anything to stop it. So unless they realize this reality, they're putting their entire countries at risk. So I hope this is a wake-up call. I'm not convinced yet, but I do hope it's a wake-up call for all of these countries.
Well, just Israel already, and I should say, Benjamin Netanyahu has already threatened any country that will host Hamas members. Okay, those were his words. Well, guess what? When the United States was involved in Afghanistan, there were negotiations happening between the Taliban and the Americans, hosted in Qatar. Okay,
that's right.
Qatar likes to play the peace mediator.
Right.
Did the United States assassinate anyone in Qatar? Did they violate the sovereignty of Qatar? They have bases there. They could have killed all the Taliban that were coming into Qatar. It doesn't happen. Israel just breaks every single protocol. And I want to go back. I mean, do we want that? I mean, it's great to say that the Saudi Arabia should do this and partner with Pakistan and bring nuclear weapons into the Middle East. What I'm saying is, no, we don't want nuclear weapons in the Middle East, be it Pakistanis, Iranians, or Israelis. But this is what's encouraging these countries to do it. Also, does the United States want to see what's happening in the Middle East, in a region where the United States has far superior interest in these countries than Israel could ever provide? I mean, if we set that region on fire, think what will happen to the flow of oil. Think about what's going to happen to our economy in the United States. And this is just driving these countries to mistrust the United States, because finally they're saying it doesn't matter what we do. The Qatari Emir can gift Donald Trump a $400 million plane, spends billions of dollars on American hardware. Donald Trump goes to Saudi Arabia. He comes back with what, $4 billion in contracts and money and whatever. He goes to Israel, and what we do, we write them a check. You go to all these countries, you make money out of these countries, but when you go to Israel, you write them a check. You send them weapons. Do you know that we depleted our Arrow missile supply when the United States, when Iran attacks Israel in retaliation, and with that, even the United States and Israel failed to stop all the Iranian missiles from hitting targets there, that the United States depleted its Arrow supply reserves.
Well, that's right, Jamal. But I think I'm going to just say something that is a little bit different than what you just said. You said that we collectively don't want nuclear weapons in the Middle East, in the Arab world. I think from a strategic standpoint, not having nuclear weapons is a mistake. I'm just talking strategically.
Well, it's a mistake because Israel has them, and the idea is not to encourage other countries to have them. The idea is to get rid of them.
Yeah, but the point being is that if you are in one of these Arab countries, Jamal, in the Gulf, or have signed the Abraham Accords in North Africa, or Camp David Accords, and you believe that you're sitting pretty, getting money from the United States, and everything's fine, you are delusional. Israel has nuclear weapons. They have the largest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the region. If you're MBS or from the Gulf or even Egypt and Jordan, and you're not thinking strategically about what has happened, you're really, really delusional. So even though we want a world without nuclear weapons, of course, that's not the reality right now. If to not kind of go in that direction, or to not recalculate your analysis of, what this strategic relationship with the United States has brought you, to really think through that carefully, you're headed for a real disaster. I mean, I'm glad that maybe MBS has, opened his eyes a little bit. Who knows what it means to have this strategic partnership with Pakistan? But these countries got to wake up. The United States and Israel are not your friends, and let alone your strategic partners. If they would allow a cruise missile, most likely an American cruise missile, to violate airspace, to kill sovereign Qataris and Palestinians in Qatar, you're not protected. Saudi Arabia is not protected. UAE is not protected. Egypt is not protected. Jordan is not protected. If you believe you're protected, you're really not in reality right now, Jamal. That's what I think.
Moving on to our main topic, Jess, which is this week, the United Nations General Assembly meetings, I should say.
Yes.
And countries now preempting those meetings to declare which they said they were going to do at those meetings, recognizing the state of Palestine, and started, we named some of these countries. The UK is one, Canada, Australia, Portugal. It looks like France will do it any minute, Belgium, and so forth. And which means now, plus or minus one or so, the numbers of countries recognizing the state of Palestine would jump by 10, meaning instead of, I think, what is it now, 143, it will be 153 that recognizes it. And then there is a vote to admit the state of Palestine to the United Nations General Assembly, not as an observing member, but as a permanent seated
as a state.
So at the General Assembly, the United States does not have the veto power to do that.
Correct.
and so that's the next step. It's going to happen. And now the debate, which I've been hearing and listening, aside from the argument that the Israelis made, and we'll get back to that argument, and the Americans are making, even within some of the Palestinians and within Arab intellectuals and so forth. Some of them are saying, yeah, this is a great move. Our guest last week was an expert on this and
Right.
on legal law, said this must happen. But then others are writing and saying, this is just symbolic. It's meaningless because Israel still controls Palestine. None of these countries are stopping Israel from, that's a good argument. None of these countries are doing anything about stopping the genocide. They are still selling weapons to Israel, like the UK and others. And if you want to have this to have teeth, at least you should boycott Israel.
Absolutely.
That's the demand. So to me, I think it's a healthy debate, but also I don't want to underestimate the value of that recognition, because some people say, it's meaningless, don't do it, don't accept it.
I agree with you, Jamal. I think it's both. In some ways, it's 77 years too late, and it's not. It feels, in some ways, it's a symbolic gesture without any teeth to it. And I think I agree with you. There's some merit to that analysis, but the potential long-term consequences and legal consequences within the United States, within the United Nations, and the larger international community of law, recognizing a Palestinian state could very well have significant long-term implications. Is it going to change the life of Palestinians on the ground in Gaza? No. Genocide continues, Jamal. Is it going to change the facts on the ground for Palestinians in the West Bank and Jerusalem who continue to be assaulted, have their land taken away, continue to have annexation going on a regular basis, their land burned, being attacked without any legal protections? That probably is not going to change. So I think we have to recognize that this is a duality and a very kind of split. There's positive long-term implications, but it's really not going to change on the ground for Palestinians what it materially means to be Palestinian right now, Jamal. In fact, it may make things worse. I mean, Netanyahu and Smotrich have said that they will probably, I think their threat that they will annex the West Bank and Jerusalem now if this vote goes forward. I mean, we know functionally it's already annexed.
You're right, and that's why Netanyahu is coming he's meeting with Donald Trump at the end of the month. He wants to get the green light
to annex.
And there are, basically theories. One is that he's going to announce the annexation of the settlements. So basically, a large swaths of land in the West Bank, not all of the West Bank, because he doesn't want to have the responsibility over the population where most of the Palestinians live, because if you annex it, you have to even if you occupy that land, you have to take care of healthcare, you have to take care of infrastructure, fix the roads, and again, it's kind of, they want the land, they don't want the people. I mean,
exactly.
that's the theory. So one, as a retaliation, kind of thumbing their nose to the international community, say, okay, you have 153 or 154 countries recognizing the state of Palestine. We don't care. We're going to annex it, and the United States is going to give us the blessing. And he's not going to do that without the green light, just like Donald Trump basically gave the green light for Israel to annex the Golan Heights or to move the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. So we have to wait and see what's going to happen after that meeting. But I want to argue with you about, is it going to change things? Yeah, it will change things. Nothing will change the lives of people in Gaza unless you start by stopping the massacre, meaning the ceasefire, and then having countries come forward to rebuild Gaza. But what will happen as far as the people in the West Bank, if you are a state, a recognized state, they will have actually legal claims, because every day now the settlers steal land. And there is no way, nowhere for you to go and argue that. But if you are a recognized state with borders, you can always say, you can take them to court. They stole my land by force, by whatever. And so it will give some legal arguments. Also, the state of Palestine can, for example, at the United Nations, ask for international force, request that.
Right.
I don't know if they'll approve it, but they can request that as a country to receive some protection, to protect their farmers in the Jordan Valley, to protect their farmers outside Nablus and so forth. There are things that's why Israel doesn't like to see, because they will give that Palestinian state the legality, not just at the ICC or at the ICJ, other avenues to submit claims. Now, are they going to implement them? I don't know about that, but at least you have the legal right to do that. But I think the most important thing about this whole discussion, Jess, is that Israel, including Netanyahu, they always say, blame the Palestinians. Now they say Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. And we know Hamas does not represent Palestine. Hamas is a group within the Palestinian society. But they want to shift that blame on October 7th, Hamas, on the entire Palestine. I mean, here is what's happening in Gaza. It has nothing to do with what's happening in Ramallah or what's happening in the West Bank. Yet they go and kill people in the West Bank. They arrest people in the West Bank. They steal their lands every day. They torch their olive groves. And I think what came out of it is now, for the first time, publicly, not because we know there are videos recording Netanyahu in the past saying that he's just playing a game, just
he said that for years.
Years, kicking the can, and we'll talk about peace, but we'll keep it. But now he's saying publicly, and these are quotes what he said just a few days ago. And here's a quote: "A Palestinian state will not be established. The response to the recent attempt to impose a terror state in the heart of our land will be given after my return from the U.S." That's the message. What he's going to. I have a clear message to those leaders who recognize a Palestinian state after the massacre October 7th. You are giving a huge reward to terror. And I have another message for you. It will not happen. A Palestinian state will not be established west of the Jordan River. And then this is the big confession, Jess. In the big confession, he says, "For years, I have prevented the establishment of this terror state despite enormous pressures both from within and from outside. We did this with determination, and we did it with political wisdom."
We've all known it, but he's admitting it.
So all these talks about how there is no partner on the Palestinian side and the Palestinians don't want peace, that's all BS. He's telling you every time they came closer to an agreement, he basically did something to destroy that agreement.
Exactly. And it shows the rubbish of the Oslo Accords, Jamal. This is something that we've been talking about for decades, that Israel has never been interested in peace, has never wanted peace, that the only thing that Israel has wanted is occupation and land and to ethnically cleanse Palestinians. When we have said that for decades, Jamal, we've been criticized vehemently in many different sectors. It seems like we've been vindicated. I mean, it's sad to say, but we've been right about this the whole time. Many of us who've been saying this for many decades now. There has never been an interest in peace by Israel. Never. Whatsoever.
Never. And I've said it on this show many times. You want to know anything about Benjamin Netanyahu? It's all written. It's all in video. He wrote it. Read it. He's a disciple of Yitzhak Shamir.
That's right.
This is not Begin, but basically Shamir. He's his disciple. And Shamir always said, basically, create facts on the ground every 10 years, just kick the can down the road, keep talking about peace, and keep grabbing more land.
Exactly.
And keep getting rid of those Palestinians. And that's what Benjamin Netanyahu has been doing. He's the longest serving prime minister of Israel. And through all these years, that's what he has been doing, talking like, from both sides of his mouth in front of the international community. Oh, yeah, we want peace, we want this and that. It's all nonsense.
It's rubbish, Jamal.
It's
just nonsense, but he's managed to kick the can, for 77 years now. But the reality is that this is a new reality. And part of the miscalculation that Netanyahu has made is the fact that not just Israel is seen as a pariah and in many ways a failed apartheid state globally, but now similar things are being said about the United States in terms of what's happening. And we don't have time to talk about it today in terms of what's happening internally here in the United States, but the massive political transformation that's happening in this country to an authoritarian state through the Trump administration, the attacks on free speech, the attacks on academic freedom, the kind of going, I mean, this is just happening within the last 24 hours where Donald Trump is saying he wants his attorney general to go after his detractors, to actively legally pursue them. I mean, the transformation that's happening in this country into a authoritarian state is being viewed by the rest of the world, the rest of the non-authoritarian world, with grave concerns, Jamal, grave concerns. And so this alliance between the Israelis and the Americans is proving to be very, very problematic for the Israelis. I mean, they're seeing it. I mean, I'm not sure it's going to change anything immediately on the ground, as I said, but I think they're doing their own internal calculation at the same time.
You've been listening to Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco 89.5 FM. Go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, to download the latest shows, and we'll talk to you next week.
We'll see you next week.